questions that are being asked, I'd like to mostly address, so this is my preference, is questions that affect how you walk. Questions about living this out. What he's always told me is, tell them that if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, they'll be where they're supposed to be. But you need a teacher to teach you what it is you need to be doing. So today is Zone 1. All right, so there's no teaching, but yet there's going to be lots of little teachings. Right, so there's not going to be a formal presentation, but we'll get a lot of mini teachings based on the questions that'll be asked. Now, as Rebbetzin pointed out in the announcements, Zone 1 covers, U.S., Canada, Mexico, South and Central America is all, any islands, anything within those ranges of time zones, right? And because it's our largest participation zone, so many of you are actually here physically in the building, is, between 150 and 200 of you every week, that to answer questions and have enough time for everybody in that range is impossible to do if we only do it once a month, and get everybody in. So we try to rotate, at least in Zone 1, those that are local and those that are online. So this is the month where we're doing the ones online, okay? So you should be typing in. We've got our live stream desk all set up, okay, as far as people typing in, if you have questions that way. But we would like you actually to go into the Zoom room, okay? We have a Zoom room, and I've got people already lined up. So when you go to get in the room, they're not going to let a lot of people in at the same time. Okay? So just wait till you get your turn and they'll let you in, and we'll have that work out. So I've got the little tablet over here so I can see who's next and who's first, et cetera, so I can call on people one at a time. All right. Now, hopefully you also have your audio working and connected and that kind of thing. Otherwise, it's going to be a little tough to call on you. Okay? So let's go and begin the Zone 1 with our extension in Odessa, Texas, m.t.o.i. Odessa.
So I have a question from Mark 12.
Okay.
For verses 35 through 37.
Yeah, they're working on getting the sound right as we're balancing things out. Okay, Mark 12, 35 to 37, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. What's the question?
So, what was the point of this? Was he just trying to stump them? Was he trying to give them a clue about himself? It's a passage I've never understood.
Okay, so context, of course, is always the key, right, to everything. So who's speaking here? Yeshua's speaking, but who's he talking to? He's talking to some scribes, right? Because in verse 32 it says, and the scribe said to him, well said, teacher, you've spoken the truth, but there's one Elohim, and there's no other besides him. So there's a little argument starting between him and the scribe, okay? And so then Yeshua saw that he answered wisely, and he said, okay, you're not far from the kingdom. You're close here. He says, but he wanted to now give them a little bit deeper thing. He says, so how is it that the scribes say that the Messiah is the son of David? In verse 35, he said, David himself said that by set-apart spirit, that Yahweh said to my master, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool of your feet. Now, if you go to the Hebrew, in some of the original Hebrew, it says Yahweh said to my Yahweh. Okay? So now you've got two Yahwehs being spoken there. Of course, the Masoretes, who were in charge of maintaining scripture, took a lot of the Yud-Hey Vav-Heys out and put Adonais in there instead. Okay? I'm not going to guess and speculate necessarily why they did that. I think they did a lot of that to try to negate this Messiah figure that showed up, okay, being Yeshua. And so you have some tampering going on in the Old Testament, just like a tampering in the New Testament. I know you guys hate when I say that, but it's the reality of it, okay? Now, for you, Rachel, the point is that he's in the middle of this little debate with the scribes, and he's saying, the scribes are trying to make the case there's just one being. And Yeshua is saying, but there's not. There's two. Okay? And by the way, he never said there was three for all you Trinitarians, okay? That's something the church gave you. That's not scriptural. Okay, Rachel?
Thank you. So I have a second question, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. So Hebrews 10:19 through 22. So what does it mean to enter into the set-apart place for us?
Okay, so 10:19 says, so brothers, having boldness to enter into the set-apart place by the blood of Yeshua, by a new and living way which he instituted for us through the veil, that is his flesh, etc. Okay, so what was in the physical, right? Because now remember, Hebrews is dealing with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, etc. I mean, this is being written probably during the siege, okay? And they knew the end was coming, because that's the way all sieges end, and everybody's losing who's inside of the siege, all right? And usually most things being destroyed and a lot of people dead. So they knew that the world that they had always understood up to this point, those people that were alive at the time, was about to go bye-bye. But that world prior to it had a temple, right? Currently, well, the book of Hebrews being written, there's a temple, and in that temple there is a holy place, right? A set-apart place. So what was the point of entering into the set-apart place? Okay, the set-apart place is where you made offerings. The set-apart place where you made sacrifices. Set-apart place is where the priest went into, when you talk about the Holy of Holies, because it talks about the high priest in verse 21, that the high priest then went into the Holy of Holies, which is where there was communication with the Almighty. And what's being said here is that we now, through Yeshua, have access to that in a different way than what they had then, okay? That we have access. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, because the argument being made here in these later chapters of Hebrews is, we still have a priesthood. It's just a Melchizedekian one, not a Levitical one when the temple goes away. Okay? And that Yeshua is high priest of the order of Melchizedek. All right. Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. And when you're done with your question, just go ahead and exit the room, and then just go back on watching us on YouTube. All right, let's go to Mr. Del Taylor.
Okay, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom. My question is, how does keeping Torah transform me into the image of his son? In other words, keeping the mechanical things of Torah, not to steal, not to covet, how does that change my attitude towards external things like, the things that are going on in the world, maybe my attitude towards people who say they're going to do something, but then they don't do that, or they don't keep their word. How is that transforming me just by keeping those mechanical things?
All right. Really good question, okay? Look, you have to understand that when you're doing things mechanically, it's depending on what you're doing, there's things that you can do mechanically that are mindless, meaning once you've learned how to do it, you just can do it without really thinking about it. Most of you who've been driving for 20, 30 years, you do that somewhat mindless, you just automatically do. Now you are paying attention to what's going on, but you're not thinking about it a whole lot, okay? But when you're keeping commandments, which are mechanical things, there's a lot more than just mechanical, mindless things to it. In other words, when you're going to eat properly, you're going to have to look at ingredients. So it takes a little bit more effort. There's a character there to make the effort to read ingredients, to make the effort, if you don't know something, to call a company up and ask how they came about with that ingredient. Because there are certain ingredients that could be just fine or not, depending on what the source was. So the character is being tested in those things. You keep Shabbat, you're certainly going to have some issues. You may have an employer that's going to test you on that. A family member is going to test you on that. So all of these things in doing the mechanics transform you into Yeshua based on how you do the mechanics. If you're just going to do them mechanically and not with any strength of desire to do it well and to do it right and to do it with your utmost, well, then you're just not going to gain anything out of it. Because remember, we're transforming into Yeshua, so how would Yeshua do these things? Okay? So when it comes to the mechanics, there's other levels of this that have you transform. What about trust? See, to be Yeshua-like, you're going to learn to trust the Father completely. And as you do the mechanics, there are going to be things that pop up that are going to require you to do the mechanic anyway, because you're going to trust that the Father's got it under control and it's going to work out. Like, for example, when the whole family's about to blow up in your face because you're not going to a funeral or a wedding of somebody's. See, again, then it's no longer just a mechanic, is it? Okay, if it was a mechanic, you'd just be like, I don't go, and that's it. No, when the decision is not simple, even though it should be, right? Because the answer is simple, but to actually go and do it is not, because you have consequences that you won't desire to have. Now you're developing character. Now you're becoming Yeshua-like. When you can have the Yeshua-like character and mind, etc. Let this mind of Philippians 2:5, let this mind of Yeshua be in you, to be able to make those choices with the ease with which he would. Okay? Because there's nothing difficult in the mechanics. It's just the world we live in makes it difficult. If nobody ever worked on Saturday, you'd never have a job problem when it came to Saturday. And if they never made you work on holy days, you'd never have a job problem. Okay? And if everybody ate only clean things, you'd never have a kashrut issue. But now these things, to do them, require vigilance, diligence, okay? Consistent effort. That's transforming you. That effort to do these things transforms you. That you become, as I've called it, chag-centric, where you center your lives around the three big feasts. And then you actually take it down into zoom in a little bit. Now you become, Shabbat-centric. So you're now paying attention where you are every week in that weekly cycle. So you're planning and ready for Shabbat, okay? And you add in the new moons, and you add in all these other things, all the other feasts that are not just the big three, unleavened bread, Shavuot, and Sukkot, which are mentioned in Deuteronomy 16 as the big pilgrimage feasts. So when you start centering yourself around the mechanics, it transforms you. Okay, it transforms you. Because in the beginning, you're going to do it mechanically. But later you're going to do it because it's who you've become. All right? Del, we've talked about this before. We, not me and you, but I've talked about this before when I've said things like, okay, when you ask a Jew, an observant Jew, there's a lot of Jews I grew up with that weren't observant. Let's say you ask a Jew, why do you keep the commandments? Why do you keep Torah? And they look at you like, because I'm a Jew. Not because it's mechanics. It's because it's what and who I am, right? So when observing the commandments is what and who you are, you've transformed. Not completely, but you've transformed from what you were into something new. Because I can't believe that any of you would tell me that once you came into Torah observance, all of the Torah observant stuff just naturally flowed perfectly in your life. That did not happen, okay? Some of it did. Maybe some of it you were just like, hey, wow, that's great, I can flow with that. But there's gonna always be those few things that were challenging. Some of those things are still challenging because you've got family members and bosses and friends that don't want to give you a lot of noise about it, right? But the point is, once you get to the place where it's just what you do, you don't have to think about it. Someone invites you to a wedding, there's no thought about, oh my gosh, they're going to be mad at me. You just say, I'm sorry, I can't go. Because some of you know you're not going to go, but you're going to wait forever to tell them you're not going because you're afraid of the reaction they're going to have. That means you haven't transformed yet. Not in that area. Remember, transforming into the image of Yeshua is piece by piece. Okay, like maybe your finger first, and then maybe a toe, and then maybe an ear, you know what I'm saying? It's not like the whole being just becomes Yeshua-like all at once. You're transforming. It's a process. It's going to happen over time. Del, did that answer your question?
Yes, Rabbi. Thank you very much.
All right, good. It's a good question. Okay, Olivier in Texas.
The first question, Janet being your daughter, does that make me your son-in-law now?
Say that one more time.
Janet being your daughter, am I your son-in-law?
That make you my son-in-law? Yes, I guess that would.
My question.
And by the way, that
speaking to
doesn't necessarily, wait, hold on. That doesn't necessarily mean a good thing, because as a son-in-law, I'll be able to smack you a little harder than before. If you're not sure what that looks like, ask Ben. Okay, so. All right, go ahead.
I have one question, maybe two, but let's start with the first one. You talked yesterday, I think it was during the Torah study, about leading by example. Like, if you want to tell, I'm going to go probably more specifically for the kids. When you tell them, okay, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, you need to show it, not just say it. And I don't know to balance necessarily how to lead by example, and also when it's something that you've done in the past and that you cannot really undo. For example, probably not very clear. For example, if you talk about dating, you say, well, you should not date. If yourself, you have been dated before, granted that was before the war, but can you still advise like that?
Okay, hold on. Great question. Great point. Listen, all of you listen. This is important. Any of you that are dealing with children, all right? You must do two things. One, you cannot be telling them not to do something you are currently doing. And you cannot be telling them to do something you're not doing. Okay, you have to lead by example. I understand. It's hard to say to them, well, the example that came up in the conversation the other day was, it's hard, to listen to a parent saying don't smoke cigarettes while they're smoking a cigarette. Okay? So that's part one. Second point, if you're trying to get them to not do something that you did in the past, but you're not doing now, then you must make the case for why you recognize now that was an unwise thing to do, and if you could do it differently and go back, you would do it differently. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay? You have to be able to make that argument. Okay, like for example, we make a case from Scripture that you should stay and wait in terms of your virginity till you're married, right? Because that should be when you have that kind of intimate relationship. But of course, the kids are going to all look at you like, well, you didn't do that. And then you could say, let me explain to you why I regret with all my being that I didn't do it that way, that I didn't wait for that right person, that I didn't wait until that right moment, okay? And you could do that with any aspect of, I did this in the past, and the child goes, well, you did it, and you go, yes, and it messed me up, and it caused me pain. I'm trying to help you avoid that, okay? So it's not just say, well, I don't approve of dating at the age you're at. You need to wait till this age to date. And they're like, well, you dated when you were that age. Yes, and it was stupid. And it caused me pain and drama and trauma and everything else. All right? Look, first of all, did that answer the question, Olivier?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi.
All right, good. Now let me just continue with something else on top of that. Olivier, you can go out of the room if you're done, but I'm going to just finish with some pieces for the teenagers, okay? Look, this came up the other day where we talked about respecting or disrespecting and, someone saying, well, you're a child, you don't know anything. I think Taylor was bringing that up, right? This idea of someone saying those things. Look, you are children. You're growing into adulthood. I always tell the teenagers you're weird because you're not a kid, but you're not an adult. You're weird, okay? It's a strange thing to be. I used to talk to the teenagers every feast, and I'd always start it off saying, I get it, you guys are weird. Okay? Because you're in a weird place. You don't want to be an adult, but you do. But you don't want to be a kid, but you do. Depends on the moment, okay? And so it's a strange place to be. But you don't know what you don't know. That's why we would call you a child. So we don't mean to be insulting, but you don't know yet what you don't know. And only time can get you there, or listening to someone who's already been there can get you there. So you can take the hard path, which is learning it yourself, in which case you'll make a bunch of mistakes that may leave you scarred and messed up for a while, or you can listen to somebody who's already made those mistakes and been scarred and messed up and tell you why it's a bad idea, okay? So all you teenagers, Dating is not a social event. The world does it as a social thing. This is what we do. It's our social interaction. We date. And on top of dating, we do physical things together. That's not wise. Forget about let's just take the scripture out of the mix. I'm just going to tell you just from human beings, when you bring lots of dating when you're not ready, mature enough to do it, one or both, usually it's both, all that ends up happening eventually is trauma and drama, or drama that causes trauma, okay? Because you emotionally bond, then that means you're more susceptible to all the pain and hurt when it doesn't work out, which much more often than not, it doesn't, okay? Okay? If I asked everybody to raise their hand who was in the world when they did these things and said, how many of you married the first person you dated, I'd get very few hands, okay? If any, every now and then somebody will raise their hand, they may only dated one person and married them. Fine, okay? Yeah, my daughter's smiling, but I said, but you were in this and you had my guidance, okay? All right? But I'm just saying, all of us that were not, we were just in the world, okay? We dated like everybody else dated, and it was social, and it led to pain, suffering, emotional damage, emotional trauma, eventually a bunch of women hating men, a bunch of men hating women, all this stuff because we were not capable emotionally and ready emotionally to do this thing that's not meant for children to do. Then we get physical, and we start having sexual interaction. Now you're bonding worse. In other words, you're way more bonded to that person. And then it's even more painful, the trauma, drama, when it doesn't end up lasting forever. Okay? And so you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to believe me. You can say it's all a bunch of blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Then you're going to just bring that trauma to your life. And you know, because as I know all teenagers think, well, I'm different. No, you're not. Every teenager thinks I can do it, and even if nobody else was ever to do it in history, okay? You know why? Because you're dumb, and you don't know it. I'm not trying to be offensive. That already made all the teenagers say, that guy's an idiot. All right, good. I'm not the one that's gonna suffer and be dumb. You are. I've already done my dumb stuff, okay? And I can look back and regret. Any of you over the age of 40 regret anything? Every hand goes up, okay? But also, can we all admit that we were really, really hard to reach when we were teenagers to make us not do it anyway, okay? We were just dumb. So just remember this later when you guys do this dumb stuff you do, and that when you're miserable and suffering and traumatized and damaged and scarred and needing therapy the rest of your life, that's because you didn't listen, okay? Because that's what happens when you're not physically, emotionally, etc., prepared for what you're doing, okay? So there's no other result that can come out of it, okay? It'd be like asking someone that played a little bit with Tinker Toys or something, played like with I don't know, Lego or something, and then saying, can you work on my car? And they're like, well, I built a little kit that made a little toy out of Legos. I mean, you're over your head, okay? So it's not gonna go well. But do you understand that you're over your head? Do you receive that? Can you understand that? And at every feast, I used to talk to the teenagers and beg them to listen to me, and immediately they would laugh and ignore me. And I just looked at them like, I don't care, that's your problem. I gave you the advice. Okay, I told you if you would listen to me, this could be the best event you've ever been to. No trauma, no drama, but they would never listen. Okay? And so just keep that in mind. So as parents, all we can do is two things. Lead by example, explain why what we had done as a younger, when we were younger, and the child throws that in our face and say, yes, you're right, I did those dumb things, but they were dumb. And if I could go back now, I would never do that again. Why, Mom? Why, Dad? Because it caused nothing but drama and trauma and scars and things that I still have, that are still there, okay? That's the only argument that you can make. That's the only case you can make. All right, so that was a good question. Thank you, Olivier. Did you have another one? Because you're still in the room.
Yes, I do. It's actually a follow-up related to the same topic. So you also advise us to switch at some point when the kids become older, to switch from a parent role to an advisor. Now, when you're advising, you may want advice to do or not do some things, but could you expand on from the kid's point of view? Advising, does it necessarily mean let them do what they want, or maybe still kind of parenting because you said no, that's not a good idea, you shouldn't do that?
All right, so, man, I should just do a whole seminar thing on this, even though I know I've already done it like 15 times at like feasts and stuff, okay? You have to understand your role. Now, I couldn't talk about this 25 years ago when I was in ministry in the beginning, because I didn't have children. I just barely been married for 5 minutes. But now I've got 2 adult children, so I have a little bit of a better understanding about this subject. So that's me trying to say I've got some street cred here, okay? Now, parenting is a vital role we play up to a certain point. Now, parenting is when all of the decision-making responsibility is on you. When they depend on you to take care of, they can't take care of themselves. You have to take care of them, provide for them, guide them in terms of like, you need to do this, go clean your room, go do this, go do that, whatever. Don't do this, don't touch that. That's parenting. That's young children. As they get up to that teenager, 13, 14, they have to be you have to start to prepare them for adulthood. What is adulthood? Everything now is their responsibility. You can't go from everything being yours to everything being theirs without a transition. It's not going to go well, okay? So over time, you must give them more and more responsibility to make choices and own the consequences of their choices. So that's the first part of this. The second part of this is you still, however, can tell them if they do certain things that there are consequences. They can still choose to do it, but there's consequences. I've told my children when they get to a certain age, I said, look, these things that you may be tempted to do, that's your choice. It's going to ruin your life. That's up to you. But you can't do them in my house. That's now counseling and advising adult to adult. All right? Everybody should be telling their children, don't do drugs. But they're going to do it anyway, some of them. And knowing that that's possible and I can't force that, fine. I said, and if you do, you cannot do that here. Some of them are going to decide to get sexually active and do other things you said not to do. Fine. You cannot do that here. Now, I'm not throwing them out if I find out that they're doing these things, because I still have responsibility until they're 18 to give them shelter and clothing, etc. But I tell them that once you're 18, if these are the things you're doing, you can't do them here. You need to go somewhere else. Okay? So starting at 14, 15, 16, I can't throw them out, but I can tell them there'll be consequences if these things are going on. Okay? But know that once you're 18, if you're going to continue behaving this way, you're going to be having to do that somewhere else. Now, I also tell the children, I told my children, that having you leave is the goal, no matter how well or badly you behave, because the next part of your growth can't happen in my house. So it's not necessarily a negative, awful thing that I'm telling them they're going to have to leave. Not necessarily at 18. If at 18 they're still behaving well and conducive to the laws of the house, so to speak, they can stay until they're ready to leave, as long as they're preparing to leave. If your child is 18, 19, and 20, and you have not seen any evidence of them preparing to leave, you just need to throw them out. You push the issue, because you're the problem now. You're allowing them to be stagnant and actually regress. My children knew from 16 easily, maybe earlier, the plan is for you to move out, because that's where you're going to make the next step of growth. But it's my job to help you, if you will work with me, be ready for that, okay? Now, of course, if you don't want to work with me and you want to be antagonistic to the rules of the house, I'll throw you out anyway. Only because my responsibility ends when you turn 18. I don't need to take care of you, all right? Nobody will fault me for throwing you out. However, I love you. I'd love you to stay until you're ready, and I'm going to help you get there as long as I see you actively working towards that. Which, by the way, would mean they would have to listen a little bit and get guidance. Now, of course, if you're a miserably unsuccessful person, what are you going to offer your child? They look at you like, oh, so this is my future, to listen to you to end up with this? It gets a little tougher. But if you have enough success, meaning you have a decent living environment and you don't struggle to pay for like normal things, okay? There's not a rampant stress in the house all the time because you have no idea what you're doing. How can you mentor someone when you have nothing to show for it? You should go get mentored and then pass that along, okay? If your house isn't in order, meaning you can pay your bills, have decent food, decent clothing, decent shelter, whatever decent means to you, okay? I'm not talking like you have to have a mansion or whatever, a decent car that works so that you can get places, all right? Unless you happen to live like in New York City where you can get around without it, right? But most places you need a vehicle. What is your child watching you do? Are they watching you just sitting around playing video games and watching TV all night and just have a job that sucks and all you do is whine and complain about it and you can't pay your bills? What are they learning from you? Because you're too busy wallowing in your misery. And then you think you're going to straighten them out. Doesn't make any sense. Okay? And then you want to tell them that they should be in this walk? What fruit are they seeing? All right, so you eat differently and you keep a different day, but your life still is awful. Where's the blessings? Where's the fruit? Where are they seeing something worth having? All right? Because let's not kid ourselves. We don't do this because we just have this love for the Creator. We have this love for the Creator because the Creator loves us enough to tell us, hey, there's a better way. And that better way leads to a better life. Isn't that why we do it? And that's why we love Him. Not just because we found out there's a Creator. Okay, so there's a Creator. What's that to me? Well, He says, if you listen to me, you'll be blessed. He says, if you do what I say and trust me, you'll be blessed. Oh. Maybe you got to start off with 6 days you shall do your labor. I mean, there's no place in here that says you need to spend hours and hours reading your Bible or on your knees praying. Okay? I'm not saying you don't need to do those things, but you need to prioritize doing the work to provide for your family and yourself. I mean, I don't see how else you can read it. And then you want to wonder what about your children? Oh, they're watching you, okay? My children watch me work all the time. Now, I made time for them, don't get me wrong, but I worked. And I was always aiming higher, always aiming higher, always aiming higher. And you know what? As they got older, they started acting that way. As soon as my son got a job, he wanted to aim higher, and he started working that way. My daughter was like, how do I do this thing? And look at how she wants to aim higher. But it's from watching me. The example that's being set. What are you guys doing out there, right? Okay, let's go now to, all right, looks like Lewis over in Odessa. Now that you guys got your camera on and things working.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom.
Quick question about the portion didn't get to last night. Leviticus 19:16.
Okay.
Do not go slandering among your people. Do not stand against the blood of your neighbor. I am Yahweh. So the blood here, is that just a general reference to the well-being of the neighbor, or is there something deeper there, something more profound?
Okay, I'm going to guess, because it doesn't really make it clear. These are idiomatic phrases, okay? So standing against the blood of your neighbor would mean, I think it's talking about the commandment not to bear false witness, okay? So it says don't slander, because when you stand against the blood, in other words, you're putting your neighbor at risk of death. So that would be my guess. It doesn't say, it's a phrase they would have understood. But in the context of don't slander, okay, but also don't false witness. Because slandering is just saying things not true about somebody that may or may not get them in any trouble. Okay, it just may embarrass them or shame them in some way or whatever. make them less popular with the people you want to be more popular with, so you embarrass them. But the standing against the blood, it says, do not stand against the blood of your neighbor. What's blood? It says the life is in the blood. So I'm guessing this is that now you're not speaking in a way that's going to put their life in jeopardy in a slanderous way. Okay? So I think this is the beware, this is the, do not bear a false witness. Okay? Does that work, Louis?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. All right, let's go to Lily in San Diego.
My question is, I completed the 613 commandment study, and I am now on the Love and Torah, and I feel like that's a great connection between knowing what the law says or what the Torah says, and now knowing what Love and Torah is. And today, during Zone 2, you mentioned about we don't follow the 613.
Oh, you're talking about in the Zone 2 meeting.
Zone 2, yes.
Yeah.
We don't follow the 613 commandments that's listed.
All right, let me clarify, because you're struggling to word it. Okay.
Yes.
Somebody brought up something about, do we need to go towards the Judaism side and learn a bunch of stuff? And I said that I don't teach that. They said, well, you taught the 613. I said, no, I didn't teach the 613 commandments. I taught you what the Jews tell you is the 613 commandments. Because it's a question that came up all the time. People kept talking about, well, do we have to keep these 613? If you watch the teaching, I said, look, this is what they came up with. And I made it very clear in the teaching, I do not necessarily agree with all of the choices they made to come up with 613. And when I say come up with, because this all comes out of one place in the Talmud where it mentions that there are 365 negative commands and 248 positive commands in the scripture. Fine. So then somebody ran around trying to figure out how to find them, because there's no listing of them anywhere. Somebody just claimed there was 365 and 248, which adds up to 613. All right, good. So we took one of the more popular ones by the Rambam, okay, and we decided to go through them to see. And a lot of them don't make any sense. A lot of them are stretches of my imagination to call them a command, just to try to make sure you get 613 of them, okay? And so I was not teaching you the 613 as if like these are the commands you need to keep. Some of them, absolutely, I agree 100% with. Most of them, I agree 100% with. Most of them don't apply to you because you're not priests, okay? Or they don't apply to you because you're not in the land. There's a lot of them that are restricted to the jurisdiction or parameters linked to them. There's a lot just for women, so if you're a man, they don't apply. If you're a man, if you're a woman, and they're for men, they don't apply. So only a very few of them apply to you. Out of 613, probably less than 200 apply to you. Okay? And some of you are like, wow, 200? Do you know how many laws there are for you just to get in your car and drive? Thousands. And you find out sometimes ones you didn't know when you get pulled over. You're like, oh, I didn't know that one. Okay? So, don't think that a couple of hundred is a big deal. I mean, you ever see lawyers talk and they've got the bookshelves behind them filled with all of the statutes and ordinances and laws and everything else regarding whatever. And it could all be a whole wall just for driving, okay? Just for driving, okay? So did that help, Lily? I mean, did that answer kind of where you were going?
Yes, that was kind of where I was going. I just wanted to say, to clarify that we do follow Torah. We don't follow man's interpretation as long as it's aligned with what the Torah says.
Which is why you need a teacher. The teacher to help you understand how to apply, what to apply, etc. And a teacher that will answer your questions like this, because maybe the teacher hasn't covered something yet, and you have a question like you guys have often, which is why we do these zone meetings. So you can ask your questions, right? So the Jewish community absolutely understands Torah. They also add on top of that Talmud, and they also add on top of that other things. And so do you need to understand and do all of that? No. Are you already doing a lot of it? Yes, because the base of all of what they're doing does have a base in the stuff that I would teach and I would agree with. all right? And so let's just understand, if anybody looks on our website and sees the 613 commandments teaching, it's 19 parts if I remember correctly, okay? Which is amazing since that was something like 10 years ago. But, you know, it's because the question kept coming up. I said, fine, we're gonna go through all of these so-called 613 and look at them. And if you went through it, you should know that sometimes I said, I don't know where this one came from. I'm not in agreement with what they're trying to come with here. They're trying to pull something a little sideways just to force an issue. And there was a lot of them that I absolutely agree with 100%. Okay? Because look, there are only so many that are listed very openly, like the 10, right? The 10 commandments are listed very openly. These are commandments. There are other places where Yah says, do not eat do not eat the meat with the blood. Okay, so that's a straightforward command. There's some that are very straightforward. Others, not so clear as to what it's all about and why they're saying it. So it needs some interpretation. Now, that's all the Jews ever did, by the way. I'm not faulting for that. They had to make interpretation because some of these things are needed to understand what was going on. And these are the interpretations they come up with. I agree with a lot of them. I don't agree with some of them, okay? And so that hopefully answers that question. And Lily, by the way, we need you to move back here and make more cookies and desserts and stuff.
I hope everybody's fasting from all the sweets during Pesach.
Lily was cooking a lot of our desserts during Pesach. It was good.
They were rich.
Shabbat Shalom. Okay, Olivia, and where are you in Zone 1?
Cincinnati.
Okay, in Cincinnati, okay. We used to have a group in Cincinnati.
Yeah, my dad pointed out the building that used to be where my grandma used to live. He remembers seeing the sign.
It was a while ago.
I wanted to say hi. Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi and Mishpachah.
Oh, they all said
thank
Shabbat
you.
Shalom.
I appreciate that. I have a couple of questions. Hopefully I can do a few. First has to do with last night. It was a question about the Torah study. To be cut off, is that to be killed? Is that to be put outside the camp, out of Israel? Or is it like future tense, like put out of the kingdom?
All right, I think someone kind of asked that question last night, and the answer to the question is a little bit tough because these are idiomatic phrases to a certain degree. In other words, they were understood in the language of the day at the time very clearly. You know, what does it mean to be put outside the camp? What does it mean to be cut off? I mean, that was a question I already answered last night, but it's a tough question. Look, for today, all right, those rules, by the way, had to do with as a nation in the land cohesively with a judicial system, all right? So we're not in that now. Those parameters don't exist. So now what it looks like today is somebody like me and the leadership making a decision as to whether or not somebody is potentially causing harm in a congregation because of the things that they're doing, and then putting them outside and saying, you can't come here while that's going on. You need to work on it, fix it, and then maybe you can come back, okay? Now, I said last night that I believe the idea of putting outside the camp, you know, is not as strong a wording as to be cut off from the people. Could being cut off from the people mean killed? Certainly it could, I suppose, but they say put to death when they mean put to death most of the time. All right, so we can then interpret, I suppose, extrapolate out of it that there's different levels of you're in trouble, you're outside the camp. The highest level means we're just gonna take you out and kill you, okay? The lowest level might be just being put outside for a period of time so you can work on something and figure it out. Okay? Being cut off, maybe, you know what? This is like between you and Yah. Have a nice life, go somewhere else. Okay? You're not coming back in the camp here. All right? And I've mentioned that I had to do that not too many times, once or twice here, where I've had to say, look, I hope you repent. I hope you get it all figured out. I always have hope that people will figure it out. I said, but you're not going to figure it out here. You'll have to find someplace else in the body to do this, okay? That would be more like cut off, at least from this group. Others I've said, look, you can't come back until you get this sorted out. And then when you get it sorted out, we'll counsel and make sure it's all sorted out, and then you can come back, okay? But either way, I'm hopeful that they're going to figure it out, okay? Just depending on what happened, I may think it's too disruptive to bring that back in the camp. So maybe you need to find a different camp that's part of the body to bring that to, where they will be able to accept you in a more, a less problematic way, you know? So it's not that there's a lack of forgiveness there or belief that you repented. Just some things are too disturbing to people if they already know what you did to have you come back. So hopefully that answers the question.
That does. That's a fuller answer for me. I think I missed just that little part you said last night, so I apologize.
Good. No, it's okay.
For the Omar,
No, the Omar is in the Middle East somewhere. The Omer.
Omer, sorry.
Omer, yeah.
I'm new to this. I'm a kindergartner.
Okay.
So the focus is the fruit of the Spirit. Does this require an action with it? Or is it like as you're led?
Okay, no. All right. And I didn't do a video this year, but I know there's a video in there somewhere where I've done this before. The Omer Count Challenge from last year, wherever we did the same thing. I made a little video. It's trying to get you to spend each day. By the way, the Omer Count is not linked directly to the fruit of the Spirit. I tried to find something that would take us through 49 or 50 days. Okay, something you could do every day for the period of time. Now it's 7 weeks, so if I could have 7 cyclical things that we could do, that gets us 49 days. So there are 9 aspects of the fruit, so I paired up 2 of them. So there are 2 pairs in your 7 list, right? So I got, so we have only 7, and so they're the ones that we paired up. Now that being said, you're supposed to look at it the night before and then in the morning and say, okay, today was what? Peace towards friends. So you should be asking the question, what does that look like? And then after you answer the question, look for opportunity to put that into action, okay? So that's what we're talking about, right? We start off with self. What does peace towards yourself look like? And maybe it's try to have a little bit more peace with yourself all day long. Same thing, let's start off with love, right? Love towards self. I don't know, maybe a lot of you struggle with that. A lot of people do. So then you spend the day trying to find opportunities to implement what you now have realized as you've been meditating on it, what that should look like. And maybe you don't know what it looks like, so maybe you spend the day trying to figure it out. That's a great exercise just in itself. It's step 1. Maybe just the idea that you're trying to figure it out is going to help you, okay? Then the next one, we go through the line, love towards Yahweh, love towards, right, as you keep going through these different things. And so it's something that, yes, is going to lead hopefully to action, but the first action is to ask the question, what should this look like? If it's the Ruach and the fruit of the Ruach, what should this look like in my life with myself, with Yahweh, with my friends, with the community, with congregation members, with the leadership? What should it look like being put into action, okay?
That makes sense, yes.
All right, good.
Yeah, that's more rounded for me. I struggled with joy last week, and a lot of the aspects from friends to family to... A
lot of people have challenges with joy. They don't have a lot of joy in their life, but they should.
Well, and I didn't want to compare it to necessarily happiness, because I feel like I have joy in Yah and what he's taught me and what he's brought me into. I have a lot of joy in that, but how that relates to everything else is still really confusing for me.
So I like that you brought this up, because now it gives me the sort of the inspiration to say this. We should, listen now, you should have all aspects of the fruit in all relationships. With yourself, with your Creator, with your friends, with your family, with the community, like your employer or your employees and the store vendors you interact with, right, and your neighbors, with the congregation, and with the leadership. So you should have love, joy, peace, patience. You should have that in all relationships. And then going through this exercise, though, one of the things you're going to discover is that you don't have it in all relationships. So now you have to ask the question, not only what should it look like, but why don't I have it? Where's the missing pieces of this puzzle? Why I don't have joy in all the different relationships? And then knowing, of course, the premise is that you should have it, like it's something you should have. So if you don't have it, you have to figure out what's wrong so that you can fix it. Because it should be an aspect that you have. You should be able to have all of these 9 elements in every relationship. Patience, right? Kindness, gentleness, all these things, right? All these things you should have in all the relationships. That's why I put it in this challenge, okay? And gave you these 7 different types of relationships. So you can look at each aspect in the framework of each of those relationships. Amen? Amen. All right, anything else?
Of course, I have a lot else, but I can go back out and come back in. And
Good. If we have time, you can do that. Fantastic. Okay.
Okay.
Shabbat
Thank
Shalom,
you.
Olivia. Good.
Shabbat Shalom.
All right, let's go to Melton. And tell everybody where you're from.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. I'm from Augusta, Georgia.
Okay.
I've only been in this a minute, like 4 or 5 years following y'all, but I have a question regarding when Adam and Eve were out of the garden, all right, Cain killed Abel, and it says that Cain went to the land of Nod and was married. I have a very, very uneducated guess, but when Yah said to Yah, let's create man in our image, could he have possibly made a woman for Cain there? Or could there have possibly been, I don't know,
All right.
another type,
All right.
Eve
It's a good question.
type deal?
All right, it's a good question. You know, we do read, very quickly in Genesis that people were getting married and there was all these interactions happening in different places. So first of all, you have beings, there's 2 possibilities, okay? I'll give you the two options. Option 1, okay, they lived a really long time and had lots of children. And those children eventually moved around and found their space wherever they needed to go, and so that they could run into people as you went down the line. Okay, but now we're talking about Cain, though. This is like the first children, right? Cain and Abel, the first children. So option 2. I don't know if you're gonna love it, it doesn't matter. This is the option 2. It doesn't say here that he never created anybody else, okay? It just doesn't.
Yes,
this story, from Genesis to Revelation, follows a very specific family and how that family ultimately ends up being a blessing to everyone, okay? Through the generations, through that one family line. So it's a story starting with Adam and Chava. Then we see it go to various people till it gets to Noah. Then it goes through and it gets to Abraham. And it keeps going through, and eventually we get to like Moses and them in Egypt, right? And it starts following things through all the way to the lineage of Messiah that goes all the way back, okay?
Yes,
But
sir.
in the meantime, there's millions and millions of people all over the rest of the earth that are not necessarily from this family line. So it doesn't say that he didn't then plant and put people in all other parts of this planet, okay? What it says is starting here with this one. Adam means the first man. It means a human being, really. It's not like his name was Adam, although they started referring to him as Adam, but it means a human being, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so does that make more sense? Does that work?
Yes, sir. It definitely does.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Because you got to remember, and the reason I think my theory is fine, okay, again, I'm telling you it's a theory, is because you read about the genealogies in lots of chapters where it's hard to sit there and reading all these hard to say names, and yet we know 0 about most of them, right? Why? Because they weren't part of moving this particular story along, okay? The journey that started with Adam and brings us to Messiah, those people only get mentioned in any strong way when they were a part of that timeline. okay? So there's lots of people, names that are mentioned. You know, this one begat that one, and this one, and how many children named all, but nothing do we ever really see happening with them. Because unless they interacted with the prime story continuing person, we didn't get to hear about it, okay? And so we have lots of evidence of that, so it only makes sense that there may be other things, okay? All right, so then you say, well, why did he not do stuff with those guys? Listen, that's him and not me. I don't know what he does, why he does. I don't know what he does and why he does it. I know what he talks about here, because this he tells us at least, but the stuff he doesn't tell us, guess what he says? Those things are his. The things you don't know, they belong to him. The things that he's revealed to you belong to you. That's scripture, okay? All right, next. Thank you, Melton. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Rosita in m.t.o.i. Odessa.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. We know that Yeshua was slain from the foundation of the world, but could you give me a clear understanding of Hebrews 9:26, please?
You guys want to go to the fun places like Hebrews. Okay, Hebrews 9:26. Verse 26 says, for if so, he would have had to suffer often since the foundation of the world, okay? Now, well, we're looking at this in the context of the temple. Remember, this is if you read back into chapter 9, it's talking about temple service. And so what's being said here is that he wasn't a part of this temple service thing. He was slain from the foundation of the world as a redemptive exchange. By the foundation of the world, it's not like he was actually killed before the world existed. It was agreed upon and was going to happen at some point before everything got made. In other words, I believe, again, there's no scripture for this, I believe that the Father and the Son in John 1:1 had a conversation, right? Because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, the Word was Elohim. And I believe that that discussion had to do with the creation of all of this. Okay? And in my hallucination, I picture, because they give us the metaphor of a son and a father. So I picture the son coming up to his father and saying, hey, Dad, I want to make something. Sons do that to their dads all the time. I want to build something. But what do you want to build? I want to build a universe and a world, and I want to create people to be with and spend time with. I mean, it's great being with you, but I want to have all this stuff going on. And the father says, that's great. I'll help you do that. But bear in mind that in order for it to be what you ultimately want it to be, where we can spend forever with them, etc., they're going to have a finite life. And then because of these other things that are necessary for our interactive rules like Tameh and Tahor and the state we can interact with, you're going to have to be willing to redeem them or this won't work. I believe that because it's just like, I know Isaac knew what was happening when Abraham brought him up to Mount Moriah to offer him up, okay? Because after all, if you actually understand from the genealogies and the timeline, I mean, Isaac was not a 14 or 13-year-old little kid. He was a fully grown adult, and his father was old. He had to carry the wood because Dad couldn't. He had to actually build the pyre, so to speak. He had to climb up on it, strap himself down, whatever, and willingly do all that, okay? And so when it says Yeshua was slain since even before the foundation of the world, in other words, this was always going to happen. It was agreed upon. Now, on the one hand, it matters a lot when it happened, meaning that it was the timing the Father had for it to happen when it happened. On the other hand, it didn't matter at all. In other words, one way or the other, when it happened, it would affect everybody before and everybody after. It wasn't something that only was going to affect everybody going forward. Okay? This Redemptive Act was for all whoever would or did live. And so it was not relevant specifically to the timeline of, because a lot of Christians are walking around thinking, well, we're special because, we're after he died and everything. That doesn't make any difference, especially when you're dealing with beings outside of time. So the timing was significant because of the timing. In other words, what was happening, where it happened, the timing there. Okay, there were significant issues there. But as far as we're all concerned, all that matters is that it happened. Okay? Now, in this verse, verse 26, it says, for if so, now it's talking about, again, this priestly offerings, how the priest had to go in every year and make these offerings. He said, well, then he would have had to done this every year since the foundation of the world. Okay, but now he has appeared once for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by offering of himself. So he does not need to do these things that the temple was preparing people for. There were some powerful images and lessons coming through the temple service. But what he did is not a part of anything the temple actually did, even though the temple service all points to him in so many ways. He was not killed in the temple, okay? He was not offered on any altar. It was, as I teach all the time, redemptive. What does redemptive mean? It's like if someone were threatening my family and I said, take me, not them. That's all he did. I'm not saying all like it's nothing. It's the biggest thing there is. But we overcomplicate it. He said, they deserve to die. Take me instead so that they can live. Okay? Not a sacrifice. All right? Because I know idiomatically we say something like, a husband would sacrifice himself for his children. That's true, but that's using it as an idiomatic phrase, not talking about like actual sacrifices like in the temple. Human sacrifice is a big no-no. Torah-wise, that's no good. You cannot do that. All right? We're not doing human sacrifice. And that's one of the anti-missionary things to say is like, well, you can't have a human sacrifice. He was not a human sacrifice. He exchanged himself. It was a redemption, not a sacrifice. Okay? And so hopefully that makes sense, Rosita. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
All right. Let's get Megan Morell and tell everybody where you're from.
I am from Central Nebraska.
Nebraska. Okay, cool.
Yes. So my question is, on the Facebook page this week, a question was posed about uncleanness and being able to take the Passover meal, and you said that wasn't a problem. Can you help me understand when clean and unclean, the laws come into play, purity, and especially pertaining to men and women?
Yes. Okay, and it seems like I answer this question a lot. So as you might be new, and as you watch and listen to other things, you'll hear this answered a lot. So I'll answer it for you here, though. Okay? The laws of Nida, the laws of Tameh and Tahor, Tameh being unclean, Tahor being clean, are very specifically a status that would have you be either allowed or not allowed to be in the temple, okay, to do things temple related, okay? Now, it'd be like if, you live in Nebraska. Let's say there was a law that is in Tennessee, okay, but doesn't exist in Nebraska. All right? So if I do this thing in Tennessee, I'd get in trouble. I go and do it in Nebraska, it's fine. So jurisdiction matters, right? There's certain laws that only relate to you being in the land. There's other laws that require a cohesive nation with a judicial system. These laws are related to the interaction with the Almighty, with his presence in this building or this place. Like when they were in the wilderness, it was this Mishkan, the tabernacle, the tent in the wilderness, that you had to be in a state known as Tahor. Okay, this is clean. It's a state for ritual interaction. Okay? I mean, if you were never going to be in the temple, you could interact with people no matter what state you're in, and it wouldn't make any difference. It doesn't hurt anything, no harm, no foul. That wasn't the problem. Problem was, if you interacted in the state of Tameh and accidentally came into contact with somebody who might be going to the temple, you now made them unclean, okay? So this behavior, in terms of certain rules about if you touch a dead animal or a dead body. If you're a woman and you're having your monthly cycle. I mean, these are things that would render you tameh in anybody you came in contact with. All right? So we have no temple. So there is no ritual purity that we need to have to interact with something that doesn't exist. So I'm not saying those laws are done away with. They've been rendered moot. In other words, there's The reason for it doesn't exist. We have another temple, and they're doing temple service, and we got the Levites running it or whatever. What looks like we see in Ezekiel, playing out with this third temple, well, then all of that's going to come fully into play. Okay? But right now, for your understanding, okay, there's no temple. There's no, what you are in terms of tameh or tahor affects nothing. Okay? Because it's not sin that makes you tameh or tahor necessarily. Okay? I can have an animal die on my property and I have to move it off the property. I'm now tameh. I'm unclean. I didn't do anything wrong. All you women do nothing wrong when you have your cycle every month. There's no sin involved there. See, tameh is almost always connected to something of death. Okay? Now, sin also can make you tameh, I'm just saying. But you can easily be tameh without sin. So without sin or death involved, just these things that happen that would normally make you tameh, you could do everything else. You could eat lunch, you could hang out with your family, as long as nobody's going to the temple. Now, since nobody knew who they were going to interact with and whether they were going to end up at the temple, these rules are vitally important. Which, by the way, has to do with, when I had the discussion about my little hallucination about Yeshua and the Father, right? A lot of that had to do with their rules of interaction. This is what I say in the Father and the Son teaching, so we understand why the Father has not been here. I believe that the Son can interact with us no matter how dirty and unclean we are, okay? Because he does. I mean, look at the people he's interacted with throughout Scripture. They were not perfectly clean and ritually whatever, and he still interacted with them. The Yahweh of the Old Testament is interacting with people. But yet you have this incredibly powerful thing in Revelation 21. It says, there'll be a new heaven, a new earth, and it says, and now this great pronouncement, Elohim is now dwelling with us. And when Elohim is mentioned by itself, it's talking about both, okay? Because now the Father, so if Genesis 1 is both, Revelation 21, so both ends of the book are both, but yet it's not until Genesis 2 and 3 that we started finding out there's one called the Yahweh Elohim. So this is referring to one of the specific ones. Of course, then you have also in Genesis that Yahweh calls down fire and brimstone from Yahweh in the heavens. So now we're told there's two of them, okay? And then, of course, we have the quote where David is saying, Yahweh said to my Yahweh. Of course, in a lot of the translations, that's what it says in the Hebrew. Some of the Hebrew's been altered to put Adonai in there, but this is what it says in the Hebrew. But the interaction has rules. Like even the temple, anybody of the priesthood could go into this section, but to go into this section, only the high priest could go, right? And only once a year, and in certain blah, 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 he had to do certain things to go in, right? So there are these protocols of interaction. So I don't believe that the Father is anywhere on the same level as the Son. He's so far above. And Yeshua, by the way, says this. So all you Christians need to stop freaking out that they're the same. They're not the same. Yeshua says these words. He says it. Go look it up. My Father is greater than I. So please have no problems with that. First time I taught that, people got meltdowns, and it's like, stop. I'm just reading you what he said. He did not consider it that he was on the same level as the Father. That doesn't mean that he's not of the same. Listen, it'd be like your 4-year-old thinking he's equal to you, okay? And you're a grown adult. No, you're much greater than that kid, at least at the moment. But you're still human beings. I think Yeshua is still whatever the Father is, but he says the Father's greater. There's still a structure. There's a vertical structure. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with, so a separate entity, but was also Elohim. All right, was with Elohim, but was Elohim. All right? So I believe that the protocol for being here and interacting with us, I think that, let me finish the story. Okay, the story where Yeshua was talking to the Father before all things started. He said, and son, once you get the world and universe all cleaned up, I'll show up. I'll come and look at what you made. Okay? Because it says all things that were made through him. Okay? So he's like, I'll get you started, Genesis 1, right? But then it's your project. It's all yours. okay? And I'll show up when you get it all finished at the end, and we'll see what you got. Does that make any sense? All right? So listen to the teaching, Do You Know the Father and the Son, where I explain this a lot, okay? All right. Did that help, Megan?
Okay. It did. Does that include the 7 days of impurity for a woman during her cycle and marital interactions
Hold
as well?
on. Now let's go into the details, all right? So you're not, status is not the problem. You can still come to services, you can still interact in the stores or whatever, because nobody's going to the temple. There is one aspect that still maintains because it's a different sort of instruction. No sexual interaction, intercourse-wise, while you're on that cycle, okay? That's still there as an instruction. And so now we have a different problem because there's blood going on. It seems pretty gross to me anyway. I don't know why men can't be patient enough to wait, but, or ladies, some of you are impatient. Okay? So the only thing that I would say is absolutely still needed in terms of all those things, or necessary, is that you do not have sexual intercourse when you're in that time with the blood. You must be no longer bleeding. Now, by the way, for ladies, that's not always 7 days. Okay, everybody has their own whatever it is. So you just need to wait until you're clear that you're done, that it's over, and then you can go forward with that if that's what you want to do, okay? Okay, did that help, Megan? We good?
Yes, thank you.
All right, fantastic.